In the black community in the last 60 years, we have this big divide. You have people who say, I'm a materialist. I got to get this money. We need the Black Panther Party. We need to focus on Pan-Africanism or our black identity. We need to focus on our political agenda. We need schools. We need health institutions. And those people are at war with the people who are talking about meditating, talking about how we have to recognize that we're creating an image and likeness of God, and we have to live our spiritual practices, and we have to do our rituals. This has been the war, these two factions, pretty much. What happens when they come together?
The future is here.
Peace, and welcome to this introduction to the 14 Call of Ra. I'm Coach Hakai Ma'ark, father, husband, and priest of the Ra tradition of ancient Kemet. And on today's video, we'll be going into this great history of the 14 Call of Ra, how it is applicable as a personal and spiritual development system. Before we go deeper into Kemetic spiritual science, Kemetic religion, it's very important to take a new look at it. Most of the interpretations of Kemetic religion, so-called Egyptian mythology, are Eurocentric or Indo-European in their interpretation. Most of the texts that we view as the foundation of Kemetic religion are texts that come at a time when Kemet has already been heavily invaded. The focus on the 42 negative confessions and this perception of Ma'at comes in the later dynasties, and it's not fully in its original interpretation. Even the centralization of the Wuser, also called Osiris, the Aset, the Heru story as a central theology, though it was very important in Kemet, there are other stories around Kemet, other families that also played a major role. We only focus on the Wuser, Aset, and Heru mainly because of the people who are interpreting it, because it's connected to their own religions and Judeo-Christianity of God, Jesus, and the Virgin Mary. That's one of the reasons why we focus on it mainly. Also, the fact that the so-called Book of the Dead, the Runu Pertem Heru, is also a major focus. And when you think about Egyptian mythology, this is all based on the papyrus of Ani. And once again, this is written in the later dynasties. This is not really Middle Kingdom. This is not really Old Kingdom. And this is the classifications of Egyptologists. But this is not those times before you see a major, what one would call a perversion of the teachings or other interpretations that are not just about adaptation, but really about manipulation. So it's very important to take a second look at Kemet. And with the 14 Call of Ra, it's definitely a re-look at something that is older, something that is very old, even the interlude that is associated with very old. And when we say very old, we're also making references to Nubia, to Kush, because Egyptologists have done a wonderful job at causing us to separate Kush and Kemet, causing us to look at them as separate entities in terms of they were two different people. And of course, that serves the agenda, the number one agenda of Egyptology, which is to separate black people of African descent from that Kemetic history. So when you have a situation where you are first saying the Egyptians were white, but then blowing off most of the statues' noses, and then now when people start waking up to that they're black, these are black people, then you say that they are multi-ethnic, multiracial. Then now they're saying that they are of it's a Mediterranean civilization. You constantly play with the race of the people, but they've already written it in history that the people in Kush, the people in the South, were definitely black. Now, if we make the connection between both of them, the only connection you're going to make is that they were also black. So it's, and even now with Kush, they're starting to come out and try to say early Kush were filled with people. They're insinuating that those people were also white, saying that their noses were of more of a European background. There's a whole war to misinterpret and to separate the true inheritors, the true descendants of those great sciences and great spiritual cultures. And though all those factors, the interpretations of European lifestyle, their cultural beliefs, the agendas to separate black people from that history all go into how we're perceiving the religion, perceiving the interlude, even down to their colors. Has anybody ever questioned why when you go and you cannot find a dark-skinned picture of Ma'at on the hieroglyphs for the most part? I've been to Kemet and I've seen people in action lightening the Medu, lightening the hieroglyphs. You hear these stories, they're real. And so you've never seen a picture of a dark-skinned black Ma'at. And this is posted as the face of the foundation of Kemetic religion, which she was, the order, the balance, but their perception or how order, balance, and harmony is presented to us in terms of Ma'at is not the primary way in which black ancestral perspective in which the ancient Kemites, ancient Kushites were interpreting Ma'at. We're getting into the 14 Ka of Ra. What is the Ka? Ka is the plural of Ka. And with Ka, there are many different definitions. You have strength, you have genius, you have vital power of the Ba. But most importantly, and today, how we're going to speak about it is that Ka deals with the concept of destiny. It deals with the concept of your divine consciousness, your awareness of your reality, your mission, and your purpose. So this is the Ori Inu of the Yoruba. This is the Kra of the Akan. This is the Se of the Ebe people who practice Vodou. This tradition of dealing with the head and dealing with the Ka is something that goes through all black ancestral traditions, even when we went over to China, as the Ka also has a relationship to the Shin. The foundation of spirituality and ancient Kemetic science has to do with this unification of the Ka and the Ba. This is what brings stability and balance into the world. And your Ka and your Ba is unified through your Eb. And we see this iconography in the crowns of Upper Kemet and the crowns of Lower Kemet. Upper crown, the Hajj is called, or the Hajjet is essentially a phallus. Osiris crown is essentially a phallus, a penis. And the lower crown, the Ba, is essentially a vagina. And when they unite, you give birth to Heru, you give birth to your will, your heart, or essentially the Eb. And this is what is weighed later on in life on the scales of Ma'at. And from an astrological perspective, essentially what is being said is that your Eb, which has a lunar association, the moon, must reflect the light of your Ka, the sun, and your Ka being your destiny, your purpose. We'll go a little bit more into it on another video. Here at Astro Ra, we like to be very practical. We understand that part of the presentation of Kemet as being the Egyptian mythology, the mysticism, the mysteries, a part of it is to create this idea that these were primitive people who are not grounded in reality. When we talk about the 14 Ka of Ra, we must understand that is related to rainbow science. And I'll show it through the other traditions, how the 14 Ka of Ra go into the other black ancestral traditions, the other African traditions. A rainbow has 7 colors. And of course, some people are starting to think about the chakras. Yes, there's also a relationship with the chakras. Usually, what people don't know is that usually when you see one rainbow, 7 colors, there's usually a second rainbow behind it. A dualization, and we see this dual concept happen a lot in ancient Kemet, and we also see it happen a lot in other black ancestral traditions. So another perspective of this rainbow science is that even when you do not see the second rainbow, the idea is that there's still half a rainbow. There must be another half, meaning that rainbow is half of a circle. The other half of the circle, the other 7, create the 14. Now, in ancient Kemet, one of the primary images of the 14 Ka of Ra is in Efu Ra or Afu Ra, when Ra, or when the sun goes into the earth. And this concept of heaven and earth, which is also a reason why we practice it, because spirituality for ancient Kemet was very practical. Even in China and all these, whatever spiritual system you are looking at, there's always this concept of uniting heaven and earth. And the problems in life come from when you have people who are too stuck in heaven, too much I'm going to pray. I'm just going to meditate. I'm just going to visualize and not do really any of the earthly work that's required. And then you have people who are too stuck in the earthly realm. They just focus on their political ideology, focus on political agenda, focus only on their immediate needs, and they disregard God, disregard and tear. And part of this reason why you have these two camps of people is because of how modern spirituality presents spirituality. The spirituality was never meant to be separated, and I'll show you from Kemet, was never meant to be separated and is not separated from your political identity, your earthly identity. That's a Black ancestral principle. Your political agenda is really about what? Your needs. It's really about how are you eating? How's your health care? How are your neighborhoods? And when you look into spirituality, that's usually what people are asking for when they go to God. We need to eat. We need these crops. We need a good yield. I need to be able to take care of my family. I'm calling on God. There's not really a separation. This separation has only come in the last 2,000 years of the age of Pisces, the age of darkness, creating massive confusion. It's one of the reasons why people can't unite. Can you imagine if the priest who's meditating unites with the capitalist? Or the person who's about material? Can you imagine if they came together and now you have funding for your, this would be something big. And it doesn't need to be two people. It's already in yourself. You're already born with this. Let me get back to the story. You have Efu Ra, unification of heaven and earth. From the sun, heaven goes into the earth, and Ra goes into the Duat and transforms into Efu Ra. You also have the Efu Oser and the 14 call of Wuser. And that tradition mostly goes into the Yoruba, mostly goes into the Vodou, which I will speak about later. So you have Efu Ra, you have Mahen. This is the first imagery in the world of the Yorobos, which is the serpent biting its tail, a signification of renewal and rebirth, which is the biggest concept of life, which brings in the idea of adaptability, brings in the idea of wealth, brings in the idea of transforming yourself and aligning with the cycles. The other iconography of the 14 call of Ra deals with the Wusek collar, also called the Usek collar, and this unification with the Minyat or Minat collar that you see Ptah wear, that you see Kinsu wear, that you most of the Interu who are astrologically associated with Saturn, astrologically associated with structure and stability. In the realm of practicality, this was a leadership system for kings and queen mothers or any leaders. Because the call, when you get into them, they have a lot to do with taking care of people, feeding people, making sure, and feeding people is not just food, feeding people physically, feeding people spiritually, feeding them energetically, making sure that their spiritual needs are being taken care of, which was the role and the commitment that the pharaoh, the queen mothers, and all the other leaders made, the generals, the commanders of the armies, all the institutions and societies that they made to serving the people, which is a Black ancestral principle. Look at the way that Europeans or Indo-European cultures do kingship. It's all about them. It's all about me. When you look at the way that traditions, which are descendants of the Black ancestral traditions of Kush and Kemet, you'll see that the kingship is related. For example, the kingship of the Ashanti is very much related to serving the people. Very much related to the Black Shang Dynasty of China, the first two dynasties of China. You see the same behavior of making sure that they are feeding the people. This stuff, spirituality is supposed to be very basic. How are you feeding the people? People need to eat. You can't tell people to sit down and talk about enlightenment when people are hungry. You can't sit down and tell them that they have to meditate and talk about good behavior and good character when people are hungry, when people don't have security. Basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs, root chakra stuff. If I can't eat and I don't feel secure, don't talk to me about enlightenment. Don't talk to me about astronomy and astrology and the circulation of energy and all that. I got to eat. And we know that this has been a big problem, been a big fight in the Black community in the last 60 years, where people are like, don't be talking about all that metaphysical stuff. I got to eat. And they're like, listen, they're hitting you with the metaphysical stuff. You got to learn this. But and this opposition, which is not ancestral, because for our ancestors, they are not opposites. They are synergies. You're supposed to be dealing with both. We also know that The 14th call of Ra is a system for leadership and taking care of the people because of the myriad of Interu that are associated with the 14th call of Ra. You have Heru. You have Kent-Ept, which is the Nubian Cushite name of a form of Heru. You have Subek, also called Sobek or Subek Ra, associated with the 14th call of Ra. When you go down into the Zulu tradition, and Baba Mwana Waresa, the 14th call of Ra, that tradition deals with Bas. All of these Interu are related to the sign, astrologically, to the sign of Leo, the sign of rulership, the sign of kingship and queen mothership. To get even deeper into the Ma'at, the mathematics, a rainbow bends, the first rainbow bends at about 42 degrees. The second rainbow bends at about 51 degrees. And coincidentally, this happens to be the angles of which the pyramids at Giza are built. The slope angle at the face of the Giza pyramid is at 51 degrees, rounded about 51 degrees. The slope angle at the edge of the Giza pyramids is at 42 degrees. So here we have pyramids built mimicking these divine mathematics. We know there's also 42 sepat of ancient Kemet, 42 gnomes. This is the spiritual science. A lot of times modern spirituality talks about these spiritual sciences. They don't make it too practical to life. Black ancestral way is to make it very practical to life. Now let's go into the 14th call of Ra and other traditions. As I said earlier, starting with the Zulu. And Baba Mwana Waresa is Bast. You hear about the stories of fertility. And when you see the 14th call of Ra in different traditions, those are the main key points you're going to be talking about. Fertility, wealth, abundance, transformation, renewal. And Bast in the Zulu is responsible for the beer festivals that they have there. And these beer festivals are related to the Tek festival in ancient Kemet, when Sekhmet transforms into Bast. That's the connection between the 14th call of Ra, the Zulu, and ancient Kemet. When we go over to the Akan tradition, there is Inyankuntone and Inyankumpone. Ra in the Akan tradition, also there is a stool for the rainbow, the Kantan Kroi. In the Akan tradition, they say that the rainbow is around the neck of every nation. And this statement from the Akan is pointing to the fact that the stools are directly related to the 14th call of Ra. In particular, the Wasek. So when the Akan say that the rainbow is around the neck of every nation, and you look at kings and you look at pictures of Interu, what is the rainbow around their neck? It's the Wasek collar. And then when you look at the names of the stools in the Akan, you get the name Suk Dwa. Suk Dwa. That comes from Sek Dwa, and Sek is related to what? The Wasek calendar. The Dwa from the Akan means seat, but it also can be linguistically connected to the word Twa, T-U-A, Twa. And that connects it astrologically. And how it connects it astrologically is that the Dwa, the seat, is related to the moon because of the shape of the stool. And the 14 call of Ra are, as yin and yang, are also references to the sun and the moon. But in this case, with the Dwa, we're referencing Venus. When you see the Wasek come into contact with Venus, the planet of Friday, we look at the Akan golden stool, which is named after the highest stool, has to do with Venus, Sek Twa. These are some of the astrological associations with the 14 call of Ra and its relationship with the Akan. And I love the relationship with the Akan because it's very forward. It's very much there in your face. Can't deny what you're seeing. Can't deny that it is a leadership system. Can't deny that it deals with kingship, queen mothership. And can't deny that it's very practical about feeding the people, nurturing the people, and the responsibility of the king and queen mother and the sub-chiefs. One last thing about the association with Venus. The Interu that we see wearing the Wasek and the Minyat, they don't just have a Saturnial association, they also have a Venusian association. Ptah, through Ptah men. Kinsu, association with Venus through the sign of Taurus. Wuser, his planet, is Venus. Rebirth, regeneration. That's one of the ways, and we'll talk about that some other time, how in Kemet, the black ancestral perspective, how we deal with the planets is slightly different than what has been presented in modern day astrology or Western astrology. Let's move on to the 14 Ka of Ra and the Yoruba. Oshun Mare, creativity, wealth, abundance. It's 14 Ka of Ra, but it's also showing a little more 14 Ka of Wuser, Efu, Wuser, in terms of the fact of the rituals being associated with white cotton and things like that. But it's still driving home the same point of a union between heaven and earth. It's still driving home the same point of transformation, cultivating yourself and getting riches and wealth to take care of the people, take care of yourself, take care of the nation. We move on to the 14 Ka of Ra in Haitian Vodou. We go into the Loa, Aida Wedo, and Damabala. Aida Wedo is the rainbow serpent. She deals with wealth, fertility, but she deals with many things, very powerful. And their creation stories of how Mawu Lisa created the world and how Aida Wedo and Dambala helped her, you see certain relationships between Efu Ra. When the sun goes into the underworld, Duat, signifying, or one signification of the sun going into earth. And this association in some of the creation stories in Kemet of the earthquakes, and this is the practical science of it, the earthquakes that created the land masses or the rising of the Ka that we see is similar to the body of the Loa going under the ocean floor, also creating earthquakes. The 7,000 coils in specific of Damabala. In the Haitian Vodou, they say that Aida Wedo flew in the sky from Africa, and Damabala flew under the ocean to bring Vodou to this side of the world. And of course, Vodou was very much involved, or the Haitian Vodou was very much involved in their revolution, right? So in them establishing a nation. Remember, at the time of the Haitian Revolution, no army had ever defeated Napoleon's armies. Getting back into their ancestral religion, their ancestral culture, their ancestral values, and using Haitian Vodou, 14 Ka of Ra, they were able to reestablish a nation in a time where no one was doing that. No one was doing that, at least of black ancestral descent and on this side of the world. Aida Wedo becomes, in the Catholic synchrony, the Lady of Immaculate Conception. Now we go over to the east, further east, the 14 Ka of Ra and the Shang Dynasty with the Hang dragons. If you would look at the glyph of the rainbow serpents from the Chinese perspective, they look exactly like the solar disk of Ra with Nekabet and Wajet coming from them. The connections between Kemet and China is well documented. The migrations, oh my, and this is just one glyph we're talking about. We're not talking about Ma'at. We're not talking about the Shin. I mean, it's no denying that they were in even the astrological lunar system, the 28 lunar mansions of China, can be traced and shown to be in relationship to the Decans and how Kemet dealt with the lunar mansions, 28 lunar mansions. So with the Shang, also what you see is that Wajed and Nekabet also are these serpents that become dragons. Ren and Nep, they become dragons. In the Shang, 14 Ka of Ra, in terms of rainbow science, going over to the Greeks, and the Greek goddess Iris. Iris dealing with the eye. And understanding why the Greeks would take it that way is because the 14 Ka, in dealing astrologically with the sun and the moon, yin and yang is one perspective of it. The sun and the moon are looked at as what? Eyes, uchat, arit, of Ra. And so that's how the Greeks interpreted it, and they interpreted Iris as a messenger of the gods, communicating wisdom. So why the 14 Ka of Ra? Why did we choose, or rather we were chosen to live this way? Well, let's talk about what are the needs. Before we even talk about what are the needs of black people, understand that this idea of a separation of church and state, at least that is spoken about, but not actually always lives, but spoken about here in the Western world, is not a black ancestral way. When you hear certain so-called gurus, certain spiritual gurus saying that to stay out of politics, stay out of the happenings in the world because you're in heaven and your responsibility as a priest is to just dwell in heaven. Understand that is an Indo-European way. That is not a black ancestral way. Why? Because the political need, what are political needs? Once again, eating, sleeping, all of the needs of your family are all political needs. And there's never been a time, and there will never be a time, where your needs do not involve a petition to God. Even people who are atheists, how they go about trying to get their money, how they go about trying to eat, they say, well, I'm going to base it on science. Science is now their God. Understand who we are as people and as human beings being created in the image and likeness of God, which means you cannot separate that, and you will not separate that. You can find all kinds of words depending on the age and the time you're living in to try to change that, but it will never change. It will never change because we're not built like that. When we say today, what do black people need? What do black people need all over the diaspora in the world and also here in America? We need leadership. We need wealth. We need discipline. We need joy. We need wisdom. Wisdom because we're constantly being misled. There's so much psychological warfare that's placed on everyone, but definitely placed more on black people. The psychological warfare contributes to the gender wars that we have, which is not a black ancestral approach or perspective. The lack of wealth, partly because we can't, quote unquote, unify. Also being on the bottom of the political system. We don't have leaders. We are given entertainers. We are given puppets and prostrating them as leaders. So a system which teaches about leadership, starting with me, starting with you, teaching your children how to be joyful even. Because a lot of times we have a history, our people have a history of partying, of festivals. This idea of when we judge, you like to go to the club all the time, understand that partying and festivals and joy, it's a part of this is how we do God. In the churches, many people I know that are Christians, even when I was in the church when I was very young, the main reason why I was going was because that gospel music, you know what I'm saying? That party and that lifting of the spirit. This is a black ancestral perspective. Wherever we go, wherever we do, whatever we call our practice, it's going to be involved. That's what's going to happen. And that's how we honor God. So joy is not the problem. It's the fact that we don't have no discipline. And that's why here at Astro Ra, our matron inter are Bast and Sekhmet. Bast, go have your joy, have your pleasure. You need to have it. Joy is power, as you will see later on in one of the 14 called Ra. Joy is power. Celebrations are power. It builds dopamine. It builds your hormones, keeps you motivated, keeps you focused, which is what we need. But you also need that Sekhmet discipline. You need to pull that sword out. You need to pull that Sekhem scepter out. We're going to do, and we're going to do it regardless. That's what we don't have. And that's what these so-called leaders that they present in front of us don't really have. So the 14 call of Ra becomes not just a system that frees us, allows us to return to our ancestral ways, but it's also a system of empowerment, a system of liberation, a system of enlightenment. In the black community in the last 60 years, we have this big divide. You have people who say, I'm a materialist. I got to get this money. We need the Black Panther Party. We need to focus on Pan-Africanism or our black identity. We need to focus on our political agenda. We need schools. We need health institutions. And those people are at war with the people who are talking about meditating, talking about how we have to recognize that we're creating an image and likeness of God, and we have to live our spiritual practices, and we have to do our rituals. This has been the war, these two factions, pretty much. What happens when they come together? The 14 call of Ra, spiritual system from your ancient African ancestors, say that they're already united. We talk about trying to help the youth. These people not helping the youth. They're running their mouth, haven't really built anything, and they wonder why the youth are being lost to the Western world. Because you cannot talk about, and this is what I said about not being a black ancestral principle, it's also not relative and contextual to our situation. You cannot live in a capitalist system and not build things. That's the way the system works. It doesn't mean that you're corrupted by the white man or whatever. It's following the tradition of adapting to the times. And the great thing about it is that you don't have to think that this thing is new or foreign. It's 14 call of Ra, and history shows otherwise. It is very much in alignment to build that. How much did it cost to build the pyramids? How much did it cost to build all these temples? Don't you know, and this is one of the 14 called I'll talk about later, Waj, the wood that went into building the temples, they had to import most of that wood. For the big projects, it was very expensive. They had to import the wood from Syria. So spirituality and getting money and the wealth aspects of fortune, they all align with each other. Where's the buildings? Where's the community centers that you are going to build? Where are you going to get that power? It's not just putting your resumes and getting your master's degrees and doctorates. I think we have had about 60 years of seeing that is not a primary way. That's not always going to really work. You have to turn to Patah. You got to turn to Dudum. You got to turn to Ma'at. The real Ma'at. Not this passive, soft, flaky, yellow Ma'at that they are pushing off as the real Ma'at. This unboundaried Ma'at, which we'll talk about later on. Now, getting to the 14 call of Ra, as I said, it's 7 pairs of 2. 7 pairs of 2. The problem, because when you Google it and when you do this research, you really just have Wallace Budge's interpretation. He changes the images of the Madu multiple times. You'll find when you do more research that he actually lists more than 14 call of Ra. And you also find that some of the ways in which he's interpreting the Madu are clearly off, and that is from, some of it is from ignorance, some of it is from just having an agenda, which a lot of his interpretations are based upon keeping a certain agenda, mainly to show that the ancient Kemites were not black. We also see from our spiritual context, our spiritual history, our ancestral history, that you have to adapt to the times. So some Ka were removed and some Ka were put in to adapt to what we need as a people. And I'm going to give an example of the removing and putting things transforming to adapt to the times of the people. In the age of Taurus, age of the bull, you see the Enter Mentu portrayed with a bull head, or Mantu. You also see Mentu portrayed with a hawk head. When you read the literature, the Egyptologists will say, we don't know why they changed it. Well, let me tell you why they changed it. Right? When you look astrologically, you see the transition from the age of Taurus, the bull, Mentu, into the age of Aries, which has the relationships with Heru Keti or Heru Kuti, with Heru Behudet, pretty much with war. Because what is Aries about? The sign of Aries is about war. So that's why you see that transformation of the principles. They constantly did this. The kings constantly changed their names to suit with the times. You have Mentu Hetep, then you have Amen Hetep. The age of Aries is called the age of Amen. This is all to say, in the interest of how we are at Astro Ra are dealing with the 14 call of Ra, things needed to be removed, things needed to be changed. First Ka we're going to talk about is the